And a very good evening to you, and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. I'm David Hines, and tonight our show is going to be on the theme Speaking Truth to Power. Every Thursday, we are going to be doing that, Speaking Truth to Power. It's very important that we do so. Power is constant in our society in the sense that we are up against governments all over the world who have not just the authority to do things, but they have the power. And power, of course, is that ultimate thing, that ability to get people to do things that they would not normally do. There is, of course, legitimate power and illegitimate power. Every time we go to the polls, every 5 years, and we vote, we are in effect giving a set of people represented by a political party the authority and, by extension, the power to administer the affairs of the country on our behalf. And so, therefore, power is extremely important. What governments do with power is extremely important. We also talk about the power of the people, and that is the power to say no to government. Just as we have the power to create government, we also have the power to say no to government. We have the power to bring down government, the legitimate power. And when we talk about speaking truth to power, we're talking about challenging power. We're talking about asking questions of power. After all, we are the ones who have that power to dismantle power. And so when we stand up to power, we are carrying out what some may argue is our God-given right. Some may argue it's our constitutional right. Some may argue it is our natural right. Some may argue it is our civil right. And so we have to get people into the business of constantly standing up to power, constantly saying no to power, because we say yes to power. And if we say yes to power, we must have that ability to say no to power. So on Thursday nights, we are going to be speaking back here, as we always do. But we're going to have somebody on specially to speak back to power. So I want to welcome everybody on Politics 101. I want to ask you to do what you know you have to do is to let others know that we are on, starting the ball rolling this evening, and then we move on to Straight Up with Cherry Duncan, and then we end the evening with Brother Mark Benshop later in the evening. We come here every evening not to skylark, not to cause trouble, as some of them would have the rest of them believe. We come here every evening to do our civic duty, to do our political duty, and to keep our people company as we learn from each other, we teach other, and we mobilize each other, because we have to be constantly mobilized, because government, those who have legitimate and even illegitimate power are constantly mobilizing. Every day they're mobilizing. Every day they meet in their cabinets, they meet wherever they meet, they're mobilizing. And so we as people have to mobilize. This week, of course, I've been in quite a mood to say to our people that we have to get serious. I find that sometimes we skylark too much. Sometimes we play around too much. Sometimes we, engage in what we hear. Last night I had to say to a young lady, I was on Mr. Benshop's show, and we were talking, and a young lady, good young lady, and she says in the comment, "Oh, WPA is dead." So she listened to me on the morning, yesterday morning on Kedaki. She listened to me on Politics 101, and then later on the night she was listening to me on Mark Benshop. And then She's saying WPA is dead. Well, I had to ask her if she likes listening to the dead. You know, people hear things in our society and they repeat them. Our young people have to learn to be engaged in critical thinking and critical look at things. Don't let people think for you. Don't let people think for you. One does not have to call the name of a political party, not because you don't hear the name of an organization or a political party, it means it's dead. We have to talk about ideas. We are out there every day and we are doing work. And I may not shout the name of the WPA every day because I don't have to. People mobilize differently. Political parties have limitations. And I always believe that one should not be limited by a political party. You belong to a political party, but you're not limited by a political party. Political parties have their roles to play, and the human being, the individual human being, also has his or her role to play, even when he or she belongs to a political party. And so one has to get out of this business of what is dead and what is alive. You know, we hear things and we don't ask questions and we repeat things. It's a bad habit in our society. As I've been pointing out for the last couple of days, we are not in little boy politics in Guyana now. From the time those people discover oil in our country, the stakes have risen extraordinarily high, exponentially so. We are no longer in little boy politics, and sometimes we get caught up in the politics of the PNC or the politics of the PPP or PNC versus PPP. And we forget that there is a country around us. We forget that there are other political organizations around us. We forget that the world is not PPP versus PNC. And often we forget that there is a world around Guyana. There's a Caribbean around us. There is a hemisphere around us. There's a world around us. And because we get caught up in our little politics and not understanding the relationship between our little politics and a larger world, our country gets stolen away from us and we don't even know. In 2020, people changed our government while we were quarreling over an election. And we didn't realize at some point that election ceased being an election and it became a medium for the handing over of power by forces external to Guyana. And of course, some of them internal. While we were worrying about recounting the vote and the election, the Secretary of State of another country was busy calling our leaders and threatening them and taking away their passport and all kinds of things. And we are fighting up about who win an election and who lost an election. And I'm saying to Guyanese this week, we all have to get with the program. We have to get with the program. There is the news and there is what is happening behind the news. There's an interview with a man called Jack Dio and a young lady, and there's a name called Mr. Sue. But there is more than Jack Dio and Mr. Sue behind the exchange. We get caught up in the exchange and not what happens behind the exchange. We have to lift our politics, because if we don't lift our politics, somebody's going to lift the country away, and then we wake up like Rip Van Winkle, who went to sleep. And he slept through everything that was happening. And when he woke up, the world has changed 100 years. The world has changed 100 years. And that is going to happen to us Guyanese. That is going to happen to us who support the opposition, because we get caught up in the small things. And we don't look at the big things. Tonight I'm going to have the Apostle on, Nigel London, someone who's been speaking and acting. Truth to power. We can say which party is dead. And the apostle is a man of God. And you all may want to say God is dead. Because we like in Guyana to run our mouth sometimes, you know? We don't link the mouth with up here. And I want to get our people out of that business. My sister who resides in Barbados, I always forget to say hello, Joy Ann Hooper Beckles. Met her in the streets last year, during the August, I think it was August and September, we had a couple of demonstrations on the East Coast in Buxton, in Victoria. Yes, we are not dead. We were there demonstrating. The sister came up and identified herself as one of the persons who stay with us every day, every minute of the day, giving solidarity as we engage in our struggle. Welcome down, everybody. Welcome down. And Audrey, welcome. Good evening. How's it going there on the Essequibo coast? Dartmouth was in the news. It was out of the news. You know, they went in there, they killed a young man. We make some noise, and then we stop making noise. You know, there is a way in which we have to be constant. There is a way in which we have to stand up every day. There is a way in which we have to do the work that human beings do. We're human beings. We may be party members. We may support the opposition and support the government, but we're human beings. And the price that we have had to pay for our humanity, those of us, the darkest of us, we've had to pay a hell of a price for our humanity. Our humanity that was snatched away from us in formal terms, reduced us to chattel. But we always know, as children of God, as children of the universe, that we were human beings. And in the end, we prevail. And we take our humanity for granted. When someone comes into a village with some little bags and ready to share out little hampers to us, little goodies to us, we don't stop to ask the question, what about our humanity? Are we just good for goodies, or are we good for more than goodies? We must not sell our humanity short. Very important. And so tonight, we are going to talk, and I rather suspect we are going to be saying some things that are uncomfortable. The truth is not always comfortable. When we speak truth to power, it is not always comfortable. Last night, Brother Takumo Gunse was here, and he was critical of our government that preceded this one, and some of you get bent out of shape as if our government is beyond criticism. Because we are part of the government, we ought not to tell them when they're wrong. It's a bad habit. It's a bad habit that the other side don't wash their dirty linen in public. That's the other side business. That's the other side business. We are the sons and daughters of enslavement. We have to wash our dirty, our linen in public. They didn't take us behind the scene to beat us as slaves. It's nonsense about washing and that you can't criticize our own. It is better for us to criticize our own than to somebody else come and criticize them and tear them down and take power away from them, and we don't know what the hell is going on. Because we saw them doing wrong and we saw them being vulnerable, and we never tell them they're vulnerable. We give up our agency because we support a party or a government. I can tell you from my study of politics and my involvement in politics, it is healthier when we are critical of our own from a standpoint of love, L-O-V, love. Some people are critical because they want to bring us down. Some of us are critical because we want to lift us up. And you all have to get out of these nasty little habits. Every time I see and hear Black people get into this nonsense, I ask myself, are you aware of the surroundings around you? Are you aware of your history? Many people who are fearful of criticism are easier to manipulate. So we want to begin to change some habits. We want to begin to change some habits. So good night, and welcome down to Politics 101. And we are going to have quite a show tonight, I rather suspect. And let's bring in our guest, first time on Politics 101. Apostle Nigel London. Good evening, my brother.
Shalom, brother. Good evening.
Shalom.
Thank you for having me here.
First time we're breaking word together. I've been following you. We have not met in public. We have to correct that in short order.
Definitely.
But, we are going to talk tonight, and we are going to talk truth to power. You look younger than me. I grew up at the time in the 70s and the 80s when there was something called liberation theology. When the Church of Latin America witnessed to the poor and witnessed on the side of justice. When priests, mainly from the traditional Catholic churches, came out and said, we are Christians, we are priests, but we are also revolutionaries who are going to engage in politics, breaking down the wall between politics and religion. You know, we grew up in this old colonial culture and say the business of God is not the business of people unless and until we go to church on Sundays. Liberation theology was saying, no, the business of the people is the business of God. I'm a Christian. I'm a son and daughter of God because I am of the people. And when I've listened to you over the last few years, liberation theology comes back. Labels sometimes are misleading. I don't want you to call yourself a liberation theologist. You're a man who is eloquent enough, so I'm not giving you a name. But let me start off by asking you this. Why, as a Christian, as a religious leader, in a culture that feels that religion and politics must be separated, why are you, as a man of God, so integrally involved in the politics of the day? Talk to me.
Thank you, Dr. Hines, and to your viewers and others. I'm certainly grateful for the opportunity to be here with you. I myself would pay attention to what you do and say. I am drawn to the passion that you have. I'm drawn to the fact that you are unwavering in your desire to speak truth and to speak your feelings. And interestingly, as you said earlier, I'm happy that you issued a disclaimer and certain caveats that, for one, it may be a very uncomfortable moment for quite a few people. Starting off with the question you've asked, I do not label myself as Christian because Christian is a label given to me by those who observe. According to scripture, it was the people who are looking at the early saints of Yeshua Messiah who said they're Christos, meaning they look like him. They never called themselves that the saints. They were described as those who behave like the Messiah. But in reference to your question, I believe with all of my heart that anyone who speaks in the church, and I'm speaking church, but church loosely here, who speaks to sovereignty must understand the power of governance and authority, because you cannot say that you serve a sovereign God, I'm speaking to the church now, but you don't have an understanding of authority in the earth. We must understand that authority is the business of the church. We are the ones who say we have power to rule and the cattle on 1,000 hills belong to our Father. So if this God we serve has so much power and so much authority, then why are we afraid of it? I looked at situations that surrounded me and injustices that I saw that were meted out to our people. And I recognize that silence is never an acceptable position for one who has a voice to take. It makes no sense for people to stand on pulpits and on platforms to speak in a closed environment. And then when there are injustices, they are afraid or unable to utilize their voices, which is the only instrument we have as preachers, by the way. We should be using our voices to collectively guide morality and other issues in our country. I recall vividly Joseph Harmon saying to the church that we are the people who should be the voices that guide Guyana's morality. Now, if a politician can say that to the church, why would we be hiding? Why would we be afraid? So I believe in the fact that as one who has some degree of influence, if I'm seen as one, I was told by politicians that I do, it should be used not just to preach from a Bible per se, but to demonstrate what the Bible speaks to, what scripture speaks to, which is the authority given to man to rule in the sphere of this earth.
Nigel Williams, the apostle, laying
London,
laying out his philosophical take on power, on authority, on those who are called to witness for God, and the relationship to politics. Tell me what got you interested in this thing? You obviously you didn't become a political person and interested in politics when you ascended the pulpit. You would have been interested in politics before you ascended the politics. What it is that drove that interest?
You're going to get me some serious trouble. I don't know why this would be the first. Why in the first interview with you or discussion with you put me into these positions that make people very uncomfortable? I grew up as a little boy I was born in London, of course, and I grew in Berbice. My father traveled because he worked with the bauxite industry. So I spent a few years, about 8 years in New Amsterdam. But as a child, I remember I grew up in the Burnham era, as you put it. I remember Guyanese were crying about the way some people, though Burnham was treating them so badly, but something happened to me as a child, 8, 9, 10 years old. I could not see what they were saying. I couldn't understand what the hatred for Forbes Burnham was when I was hearing things like, you should plant food for yourselves. We should be proud to be Guyanese. I was one of the happiest young men to sing national songs. As a grade 6 student, I would be marching. We did national service. So I was happy to be in parades and to show my grandmother that I could march, to represent the pride in Guyana. So from those formative years, I took an interest to things that happened in our country. And I took an interest to the fact that some people can hate an individual while others can love the person. I loved hearing them Forbes Burnham speak because he inspired me in his speeches. I loved the natural foods we were eating, like cassava bread and rice porridge and these things. I love these things. So I was never suffering in that environment. I was being inspired under those circumstances. Most importantly, as I grew older and I began to read about why one man could have taken a stance to say that although nations and leaders of nations may be against me, I will still be a man to stand. That is what triggered my interest. But however, over time with his passing and so on, I witnessed a weaker generation of politicians arise in this country who were too afraid to stand up to anything. And because of that, I shied away. I didn't like the dishonesty that I saw because I had many political friends. But in recent history, when I observe what happened from March 2020, the election, it reignited in me a passion because I had returned to Guyana from the USA and the Bahamas after 15 years with the intention of raising my children in an environment whereby they would not be discriminated against and so on. And to witness such weakness displayed, and here I'm in trouble already, by one who's the president in David Granger. I have never seen, I thought Ramatar was a bad, weak person, but when I saw the degree of cowardice, I would call it, from my description, not yours, in a man who should have great authority. He was protected by the Constitution. He was guarded by so many mechanisms to stand in defense of his nation. And what triggered my resurgence was his silence in the midst of a constitution being trampled upon by so many people. His silence when descendants of colonizers when those who would have once been slave masters and owners of slaves, when their descendants can arise and seek to point their fingers and say, if you do not do what we want, we'll take away your visa, we'll take away whatever it is. And to watch a leader of a nation cower to the extent that he even sought, and he did, to do that which was unconstitutional in reference to this nonsensical recount. I could not be silent any longer. When I saw political figures on both sides dancing around and playing with our Constitution, I saw the need to arise in that moment to speak not for myself, but to speak in the interest of my 5-year-old son, my 13-year-old daughter, my other teenage daughter, to let them understand that daddy would never be silent in the face of injustice in any form. And Guyana witnessed 5 months of injustice, and we are still living in the midst of injustices. And I am yet to hear an apology or an explanation from a man named David Granger or any one of those who sat with him in certain degrees of authority. And that bothers me. I am yet to hear Irfan Ali and others say to us as Guyanese people that they accept responsibility for having neo-colonialists, imperialists, set their foot on our territory to threaten us if we don't do what they want. That is not the kind of Guyana that I seek to live in. I would not be an old man and be a weak man who cannot speak for the righteousness and justice that should be spoken to in this country. So that is what brought me out. When I saw how weak and feeble a president can be, for whatever reason, I couldn't take it. I couldn't stand the fact that Sarah Ann Lynch, I sit on your program and I sit anywhere in the world. I didn't even apply for a visa. I don't want one. I don't care. Nobody would tie my neck with any stupid thing called a visa. Blacklist me. Do whatever you want to do. The fact is that Sarah Ann Lynch, in my view, is the main culprit involved in what happened in this nation. And today she cannot say to Anil Nandalal, for example, why can't you have the petition heard? Let us all see. The whole world saw the PPP like to say. Well, let the whole world see what happened then. I'm not hearing that from Sarah Ann Lynch because she knows the role she played. And that in itself, and please pardon my tone, but I speak like a man. I cannot, for the life of me, be silent, Dr. Hines, because too much is at stake in this nation. And I refuse to have any descendant of a colonizer or any new age colonizer called a neocolonialist come in my yard to seek to harass me, intimidate me, or seek to tell me that I am less of a human being than they were. My foreparents lived through that. I prefer to be dead than experience it again.
The words there of Nigel London, Apostle Nigel London, and you're on to Politics 101. Brother Nigel has raised a very important point there, you know, that the 5 months and the months before the 5 months and after the 5 months, very important stop sign in our history. And as I was saying in my introduction, we have to understand that what ensued during that period, during those 5 months, was more than just an election. Our brother talked there about the colonialists being put again in our soil to tell us what that was happening in those 5 months. Our leaders then and now have never been able to explain to you, the people, what happened. And so therefore some of you are still in this thing that is some little thing that happened. Our foreparents, some of them were brought here against their will. Some came after emancipation. They made tremendous sacrifice for this piece of earth that we live on and that we call home. And they left us with independence. And the burden of defining what independence should be must be on us. We have had our quarrels. My brother refers to the days when people questioned Mr. Burnham. He was a charismatic leader. He had tremendous qualities. But some of us, yours truly was a little boy then, but I was part of it, said, you may be great, you may have tremendous powers, but that alone will not develop us. and that we have a voice too, and we can ask questions. We went through that period of our history, and some people, well, you didn't like what Burnham was doing. You see, we have fixed notions of politics. And we worked through that period. 30, 40 years later, the party of Forbes Burnham and the party of those who ask questions, the party of Walter Rodney, said, look, we have fought our battles. Our battles were over ideas and direction. We have reached a point where we have to close ranks in the face of the neo-colonialists. And that is what gave birth to the APNU. And some of you sit there and ask yourself, but what did WPA bring to the table? You have no sense of history. And you don't want to have a sense of history. And that is why we're always in trouble. Because we don't understand that the 5 months was not about PNC versus PNPP.
No.
Bigger than that. And the sooner you all understand that, the better you all will know what's happening. That's why I have this brother on here tonight. Because he takes us beneath the surface, beyond the little thing that we see, and force us to realize that Guyana is at a critical juncture where all of us must lift our voices. Let's go back to the 5 months, Nigel.
Sure.
Let's go back to those 5 months. When did you realize something deeper was happening?
Well, I realized it when, or before the 5 months began.
Yeah.
I made a post in, I think it was a few months before elections, just before David Granger announced the election date. And I said to all Guyanese and those who follow me across the world in the diaspora that should David Granger not do that which the ABCE nations require of him, especially the A, America, not the USA, he shall be labeled a dictator. I said it before even announcing election date. I said further that the fact that Granger is speaking so much about this green economy and he doesn't want to talk oil language, he is going to run up a dangerous tree with the ABCE nations. It so happened, therefore, that once March 2nd came, and I began to see, or before that, when I saw Sarah Ann Lynch, for example, Chatterjee, especially Sarah Ann Lynch, telling David Granger that he must announce a date for election now, I looked to see in the news that Granger would have rendered her persona non grata. She has to leave this country, along with Chatterjee, along with Gregory Quinn, and every one of them who had the nerve to tell a president that he must name an election date now, as though she is the leader of Granger. When he failed to do that in December, I think of 2018, I knew that Granger was finished because he allowed these imperialists to dominate the political atmosphere of Guyana. So when we hit the election period, the day before that, of course, I know you may not watch me preach, but in church I stood in the congregation at Ocean View, and I said to them on the 1st of March, it's on record, video, I said to the congregation and live on Facebook that tomorrow, being the 2nd of March, will be a day that Guyanese will never forget. They will tell their children and their grandchildren about the events that follow, for it shall be unforgettable. That which you think is an ordinary election, I said to them, is not an ordinary election because too much is at stake from here on in. So when people began to recognize that which I said, I know you're sure it's not a religious one, but it's called prophetically, became truthful, their eyes began to open. So I was aware of the dangers that we face from the time Sarah Ann Lynch began to pressure Granger into saying, call the election date, do this, do that. And all he kept saying is, we're relying on GCOM. When GCOM is ready, we shall act. Again, I say that Granger refused to exercise that which the Constitution equipped him to exercise, which is executive power. He had the authority to act and to let Sarah Ann Lynch know that this is Guyana. This is supposed to be free Guyana, not US-controlled Guyana, not Canadian-controlled Guyana. So when we entered the 2nd of March, when it arrived, and then I saw we got to region number 4, District 4, I knew then trouble would have been begun because that has always been the decisive factor. And then when I saw the disquiet, when I saw that people began to in the Ashbins building operate as if the law, which states that you cannot interfere with the actions, with the functioning of a returning officer. When I saw people began to behave as if that law doesn't exist, so they could begin to tell returning officers how to function, I knew that we were in trouble. Because with every passing minute that legally empowered officers were not allowed to function, I knew that Guyana was going to be in trouble, because the election was no longer about who won. It was about who was too weak to win. And I hope that people understand that. It's not about who won. It was about who was too weak to win. And that's what happened.
And may I repeat it? It was not about who won. It was about who was too weak to win. Brothers and sisters, we sometimes have to look ourselves in the eye and speak to ourselves. We are very good at speaking to the other. We are very good at recognizing the faults in Jack Dio and what they did. And we must do that.
Of course.
We must. But we are going to be wiser. And we are going to see further when we're able to ask some questions of our own. And part of my mission is always that. It's always that, to say in love, we must say no sometimes.
Yes.
In love, we must call out those of our comrades who, because of factors that circulate in their heads, stray their eyes away from the prize. And some of us are not geniuses. My brother talked about the prophetic tradition. And there was the Black prophetic tradition. Yeah. It was that spirit in Dr. King that on the night before he died, he said, I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land.
Yes.
I may not get there with you, but as a people, we will get there. And so on that night, that November 19, 2008, when Obama was declared the president, we all wept. There were tears that the prophecy of our people, of our ancestors, came through. The Black prophetic tradition, and it has to come from us. Because when you are down in the dungeons, you can only think of light and freedom.
And if I may, please permit me, because I don't want to miss this. In 2016, my brother, 2016, March, I sat in the studio of HGP TV in 2016, and I said to David Granger publicly, prophetically, that you were positioned to deal with those who dealt unjustly with the people of this nation. You are strategically empowered to deal with those who shed innocent blood, who raped us of our resources for decades. This is your moment. I further said to him live on television that should you fail to bring to justice those who've done these wrongs by 2020, you shall see the greatest uprising. You shall have much confusion in your elections. Since 2016, I said further to him that he must be careful of those who try to befriend Guyana. They want your oil. Since 2016, he failed to act. People wonder why I was so upset with David Granger. I'm telling you why. On yet another platform, he failed to act. It is inexcusable for a man to hear the voice of one who seeks to guide him in reference to making a decision in the interest of a nation, and he fails to act. Instead of what I experienced was censorship. I was pulled off of the national airwaves, NCN, taken off, being told I was too political. How can we develop if we cannot be criticized? Let me say further, if I can, my brother. Before I leave my home, the people in my home examine my attire. And they can tell me, my daughters can tell me, Daddy, I don't like the color of your tie. I don't like your jacket. I don't like your beard. I don't like your hair. Well, I don't have much of it. I'm criticized in my house before I face the public. So if I'm accepted by my own, criticism from the outside don't bother me that much. We have to stop the nonsense. I'm happy that you said that. As an African people, and this is not racism, this is fact, this is my reality. As a people who are treated so unjustly and still are being treated unjustly because the UN said so. The UN committed a decade to us, descendants of Africans, because they admitted that we suffered severely. We have to stop thinking that criticism is dangerous if it comes from the lips of one who loves you. It can never be dangerous. If I know that you love me, criticism is never dangerous for me because your intention is never to harm me. It is painful to see that we have got leaders on both sides who allowed the likes of the ABCE nations to guide us into chaos and into destructive politics, I call it. And now none of them can get themselves out of it because they've committed too much and they've gotten themselves too deeply involved.
The words there of our brother Apostle Nigel London, who has been speaking truth to power, trying to inspire us as we walk this road, this very delicate road, because it's a very delicate road.
Yes.
We are at that moment once again in Guyana. Are we going to fall back into the doldrums of coloniality, or are we going to walk forward as a free? That is the question before us. Whatever else we do, that is the question that we've got to settle at this particular juncture. Brother Nigel, are you surprised that the PPP has been so blatant in the way in which they have carried blows to the Guyanese people, the way in which they've faced given away our patrimony to the United States and other countries, Exxon, to the way in which they've sought to close our eyes and shut our mouth, the way in which they've sought to take our liberty away, the way in which they've sought to take our lives away, the lives of our brother Orin and the lives of the other brothers. They're our lives. Every time they shot into the body of a young black man, they're shooting into your body, my body, and the bodies of all of us. Are you surprised that they have been so brazen in the way in which they've gone about doing that?
I'm not surprised. And the reason I'm not surprised is because I have had decades, although I lived away and then I've spent some time here, but I was a victim. I don't call myself a victim, but I had the experience of dealing with the former PPP before the transition, in which young men with AK-47 rifles, they were not military officers, they were not police officers. But yet, that's before 2015, all of that, they had assault rifles, high-powered rifles from industry, claiming to be vigilantes. And they were supposed to be guards of the community. They chased my wife and I down with high-powered rifles, claiming that somebody in a white car just robbed people in industry. And what shocked them was that this little African boy, I see myself as Hebrew, by the way, but I'd say African for sake of discussion, stopped and looked at them square in the eye and said, "Now, is this how you behave? Is this how you think you could just chase somebody down and harass them?" And the men with the guns lowered their rifles because they didn't expect to have a confrontation from one who's not afraid of them. And I said, this is not how you address people if you heard somebody stole something. Many cars are white. So I was a part of the aggression initially. But point to note is that it was aggression without as much economic wealth at the helm. Now that they have this opening called oil resources and oil fund and so on, and they have the support of the imperialists, US government, Canadians, Europeans and others, they believe, and I've noticed it, that we are no longer in this country essentially fighting at the top a race issue. We have now begun to fight a class issue, where if you are not one of the elites, you are considered an elite to these people. You're nobody. Because ingrained in them is a desire to dominate a population in terms of saying, we are too wealthy to be considered one of you. And that's what we now face. And as a part of, I must say, a group, I don't know the number, I don't know the faces, called the People's Movement, that I'm one who leads, the leader of it. The People's Movement is a term coined from the fact that Guyanese must move this nation forward. The people must move against these elitists and let them understand that that which you once did or tried to do, you would not succeed at doing it this time, because it is not about the African alone or the Indian alone in this country. It's not about who has and how much do you have and what power do you have economically to step on the necks of the average Guyanese person. And I must say that this administration, the PP Civic administration, is 10 times worse than what we've ever seen, because they are ruthless. They have no fear, since in their minds they perceive probably that they've got enough support. Even Maya Motley is here, behaving as if she's dealing with some angels. She is behaving as if she doesn't know the history. And she is numb to the fact that persons are being, the jobs are being terminated. She's numb to the fact that persons have, although we deem the poor nation per capita, people are still being fired over vaccines and all kinds of garbage. People are put back on the bread line, and she is not here speaking these things, but she is smiling with the wealthy, because probably she understands that being in the class of the elites positions you to be probably above the law, but you're never above justice. You are never above that which is called righteousness, and you're certainly never above memory. People will not forget what they've done to us. And I'm not surprised by the behavior, because Jack Dio has not gained wings and a halo.
That's right.
He has not come to the people of this nation to say that, even if he had said, I was wrong for the way I conducted myself before, I apologize to you. That which I allowed to happen, I apologize. Irfan Ali has not grown wings and a halo. The fact that Irfan Ali said that extrajudicial killings never existed in a court in Guyana. He sat as a president in New York City and said that extrajudicial killings never happened. How much more irresponsible can a president be? Therefore, he's saying that everyone who's shot in this country has been justifiably shot by the Guyana Police Force members. So I say that to establish the fact that they are now worst, because they think probably that the wealth that they may have access to gives them a buffer or immunity to the justice of Guyanese people. It does not. I'm here to say to every Guyanese listening to me this evening and to us, there is going to be a generation, if not this one, that would arise in this country that would not allow themselves to be intimidated by anyone. And the results of that generation would be memorable.
Apostle Nigel London speaking truth to power on Politics 101 tonight. Nigel makes a very important point. And I want to endorse it. You know, this is the worst regime in our post-colonial history, not because it is the first regime to do bad,
no,
but this regime has the luxury of learning from past regimes, not to repeat what past regimes have done. And if you repeat what the past wrongs, and your only justification is that they had to do it, then you are 1,000 times worse than them. I say that with no apology. My guest tonight is Apostle Nigel London. I want to welcome everybody. I know this, lots of you are out here tonight. And as I say, when we meet like this, we're not meeting like this just to blow the breeze or blow talk into thin air. This is an act of resistance in the tradition of our foreparents who suffered, sometimes quietly, sometimes in the open space, but always pushing back whenever there is an opportunity. We come from a tradition where people understood that freedom was not a day, but a process.
Yeah.
Where people understood that you can be in bondage but still get victories over bondage. And I want you all to become like our ancestors, to draw strength from them. You know, we've become a kind of, instant society.
Yeah.
Without understand that the sweetest victory is the one that you cuddle like your little baby, that you own, that you work for. And as the good book says, they shall be weeping and gnashing tonight, but joy cometh in the morning. That's why our foreparents on the 1st of August said, August morning come. It's been long coming. And they did not celebrate and go back to sleep. They took their freedom into what we now call the villages. The mark of freedom is not just what you celebrate, but what you leave as monuments. Our villages are monuments that are there for the world to see, monuments of freedom. And I want us to begin to talk and begin to act like a free people who have given this world monuments of freedom. And we are once again having to deal with those who are at the door, ready to come back in all kinds of guises. Apostle London, you went to Linden a few months ago, and you woke up that community. Many did not know that's where you were born, that's where you grew up.
Yeah.
But you woke up that community, and you asked that community to stand erect. What was going through your mind as you ventured upon that journey?
Well, thank you for asking. I relocated to Linden because of the COVID situation. So in March, I brought my family back here in 2020, and I decided I'm going to live here. And when I heard Frank Anthony say that as of, I think, the 1st of August, something around there, these vaccine policies will kick in, and you cannot go here, and you cannot go here, you cannot do that. And then Irfan Ali had the nerve to say that those who do not have a vaccine are more deadly or dangerous than the virus itself. I took serious offense to that. My children saw the anger in my house because I said, how can a president dehumanize me to that extent? More so he has a son. His son isn't vaccinated, so his son wasn't a virus. So I said, hold on. These people have got to be on steroids in reference to insanity, to think that they can just say anything to Guyanese people, do what you want, and it's fine. So in the community of Linden, I decided that I'm going to go to the market square to stand publicly, not to attract people, but to announce my position in the community, to let them know that as an individual, I refuse to be controlled by anyone to that extent. And more so, interestingly, because I know the history of Region 10, the history of Linden especially, we are known to be people who fight and who don't accept nonsense. So I sought to go to the market square to stand, to speak with passion, to announce to my fellow residents in Linden that I refuse to accept tyranny and disrespect more than the vaccine policy. I stood because Irfan Ali was disrespectful to me. And I refuse to have a president or anyone tell me that I'm more dangerous than a virus. So I stood there. I was inspired to speak publicly. I was inspired to challenge those to be independent thinkers, which is what a country lacks. We need to have a generation of individuals in this country who can think for themselves, though we may act together. I sought to stand to say that though I may stand alone, I will still stand. If no one stands with me, at least my position has been heard. And the hope of mine was, when I was standing there, that young men especially would recognize that if you allow any political figure to do whatever they want to do to you without your at least saying how you feel about it, then your country loses power. Because if your own could do it to you, then obviously those who would come into on your shores will think that they have the right. And it's proven to us that those who have now begun to come here even more think that they can do anything to Guyanese. I saw it in the news that they now investigated some Chinese firm for the maltreatment of Guyanese. Now you know that. When the Russians were slapping and shaking our brothers in the gold industry, you didn't do anything to them because you're scared of Russia. I'm talking, of course, and speak to those who would watch your show. When we know that the Chinese in the gold industry and other places are disrespectful to us, but everybody seems to want to touch them very, very lightly in the political circle. So I stood there hoping to reignite the passion of Londoners, because I know Londoners, and I know that when we get started, it's difficult for us to stop because we do not tolerate nonsense. And I hope that that stance that I took would have caused in Linden that resurgence of courage and of strength. Unfortunately, I would say to you that many things that I sought to do would have been undermined by political figures in my own region. For what reason, I must say, it is known. I do not call it a black person's issue because I'm not black in the context of discussion. I see myself as African or Hebrew. The issue we have is that our generation of political leaders were not taught to fight. They were taught to campaign. So when it's time to fight, they backpedal. And if they see a fighter before them, they think that you're threatening their power because they're programmed to campaign. They're not programmed to fight. I take umbrage to any leader telling me, Aubrey Norton, for example, and I don't have a personal issue with any one of them. I'm just saying what I have a problem with. You can't tell me that you have to be elected first before you fight. No, fight. Don't wait for Congress. Don't wait for anything. Just fight. We have to quit this campaign mentality and get into the competition mentality whereby I fight you because my life depends on it. The future generations depend on this. And we have to have the knowledge to know that if we cannot resist wrong, then in my view, you are good enough as dead.
Nigel London, what do you make of that uncomfortable interview? You referenced it between Mr. Jagdeo and that foreign journalist. As I have argued before my audience here and other places, that what we saw there was the performative clip. But behind that performance, there's a lot going on there. Talk to me.
There is quite a lot happening. When I saw that interview, I have an understanding of how investigative journalists function. I don't think Jagdeo was prepared to deal with an investigative journalist because you don't have many of them in Guyana, or he doesn't give them access to him. So once I saw that she began to speak to him and lead him down a particular path, Guyanese were surprised. I was not, because I know that he's not intellectually prepared to deal with certain people. When you surround yourself with yes men and yes women, anyone who comes outside of that world is going to shake you up. So she had no reason to kowtow and to bow to Jagdeo. Once I saw her beginning to lead him down the path of saying, okay, did you ever take bribes from people? Did you ever take anything in terms of consideration? He should have known that that question was loaded, not with ill intent, but with support in reference to, we know why we're asking the question. That's the first time that I've seen in a long time Barra Jagdeo stutter, stammer, wobble. I had a Dutch lecturer in university who used to say waffle, shake around the place, because he knows. At that point, I knew that he knew that she asked the question because she was equipped and still has information that would sink him. What I expect to come out of that interview, or what I looked at, was to see how one little woman can dismantle somebody who Guyanese apparently cannot realize is too weak to stand up to opposition without fear. I asked the question then on many platforms, and I ask it here again. Who is Barra Jagdeo? For anyone to think of him as he's some great person that you have to be so considerate of. Who is he? I know of no human being in this country or the world of whom I have to be afraid. The person I fear the most is me without Yahweh, my creator. I don't fear men. I fear me if I lose his spirit. It's not religious program, but I can't help myself. I fear me without the consciousness of righteousness within me. I don't fear people. Who is Jagdeo? A woman dismantled him. Isn't that unfortunate? That a woman sat and looked at him face to face and made him disheveled. He was discombobulated.
I'm so glad you raised that. You know, I walk through our community and I hear our people talk about Jagdeo being the next Burnham, the Indian Burnham. And Jagdeo is a good politician. And I understand where it comes from. If people beat you long enough, after time you come to believe that they must have some kind of great power. I have no reason to judge Mr. Jagdeo's competence. I'm sure he's a very competent person. I have no reason to judge that. But I believe that the kind of prowess and power that our people attribute to him is really misguided. And it is good that you can draw that image of a slight little woman making this big chibat that we're talking about look small. He was always small. He was always small. We made him big because we feel that if somebody's going to beat up on us and nothing is happening to him, that he must be a superpower.
Exactly.
Here we see that he's not a superpower. He's not endowed in intellectual nimbleness to even see. When the woman gave him the notice 5 minutes before.
Exactly.
The prowess he has. What do you think, Apostle, about this thing they've had for the last 2 days? The oil expo, where the leaders came in and the oil giants came in and the head of Exxon came in and they dance on the atmosphere of Guyana, and we were mere onlookers.
Yeah.
Tell us what you think of that.
I actually just before moments coming to the studio returned from Georgetown, where I was standing on Water Street in protest. I joined those who were there. I think Yug Mahadia was there, Lincoln Lewis was there. I drove actually from London this morning just to be there because it means that much to me. I have tried. I took an hour plus to drive home so I can calm myself down, and I think that you are being used here to reignite and to cause me to lose it again. I'm livid. I'm extremely angry at the fact that I must say that Exxon, in my view, is not the problem. Exxon never signed a contract by itself. We had to have elements and agents in our country, from our country, who did this. And when I look at the fact that Donald Ramotar, for example, as a president former, could say that he didn't really read the contract for himself. He just trusted, not the contract, sorry, the oil block. People advise him, now how can you sell a whole block in our waters to somebody who you don't even know? You don't have no hardcore evidence that they could afford to buy it. And just casually say, well, I really didn't know. To know that he was allowed under the previous administration to walk a free man. Robert Prasad said he trusted his advisors as the Minister of Natural Resources. Robert Prasad is free to return to this country and function as if everything is okay. These two men initially would have jeopardized our patrimony. Then I moved to Trotman. Hillary Clinton said that we are not able to handle the kind of wealth we have. So she invited him through Granger and others to Washington to have discussions about how we handle our wealth. They apparently didn't see how insulting that was. For these imperialists again to tell you, listen, you're too poor to handle money. So let me tell you how to handle it. America, the USA is about the most indebted nation in the world. Well, there's only one world. And they could teach me how to handle money. Why are they so deep in debt then? But Granger took the invitation. And then we knew nothing of the contract and the engagements that were entered into by those individuals. Our political figures have sold our nation cheaply. Hence, I come to this expo we had, the Energy Expo, the conference, and to see again the Bajan Prime Minister. Barbados is not known as an oil-producing nation. They may produce about 1,000 barrels or so. They're not even in a conversation about oil. And she's here to speak as though she's a guru or she is some noteworthy individual, so she could speak to this. And we've had so many dignitaries, including, as you said, the head of Exxon coming to our shores. He never came before in reference to such an occasion, but he's here now because they recognize, as far as I see, in our Guyanese social vernacular, a Paku. We have a Paku nation. These people are so weak that they will just watch us rape them and they'll do nothing about it. So they are here, as far as I saw it, to dance and enjoy the fact that they have landed so much oil, good oil that is, rich oil, light crude it's called, that it is almost a dream to find such a weak, feeble, crippled people that we can just do whatever we want to do with them. And this conference has been expectedly marred by a discriminatory and inherently racist group of people in the Pacific administration. They can't help themselves. They are inherently racist, divisive, because they are elitist in their thinking. So they've presented a forum in which, or they are a forum in which they can exercise that same behavior. And I had to go to the streets of Georgetown, again, because this is not about me. This is time for Guyanese to arise with the understanding that your nation is under attack. It is called imperialist behavior. It is imperialism. Guyana, you are under threat. You have been attacked economically. What do I mean by that? The head of ExxonMobil came here, not because he likes Guyana, but because they see in us an easy opportunity to exploit our nation excessively and have our hands tied by political figures who believe that if they rub shoulders with the wealthy, then they're important too. This expo that they held caused me to be extremely angry. My brother, to see that it's written from 2016 to 2056, we cannot, essentially without Exxon's consent, renegotiate a contract. We cannot tax Exxon. Exxon is living off the shoulders of Guyanese people. And you're here for a conference? Let me further say this. I was more angry at the fact that yet again, I don't support the PNC, I must say, or APNU FC. I do not. I don't vote for anybody. But at the end of the day, I support governance of a country. And I understand the importance of governance. I am of the view that no one should have been allowed to enter the Marriott if Aubrey Norton and certain key players were not in there to speak on our behalf. The PNC should have garnered, along with the AFC, and APNU should have garnered enough supporters. You have 200,000+ people who voted for you all according to what GCOM arrived at. Get your supporters out there to say that if our leader, I'm referring to the party, if our leader cannot, the coalition that is, stand in there to represent us, This is not going to happen. This is not the time for us to just sit back and say, well, you know, it's unfair and I don't like what Jagdi is doing or whoever is doing. This conference should have been a very, very newsworthy occasion in which ExxonMobil's head came and he couldn't enter the Marriott because Guyanese blocked the street to say, this is our time. You respect us, you respect the political figures here, and you shall have great regard for us as a people, or you're not going to have a conference or this expo. That didn't happen. So I'm realizing that apparently we don't recognize the need yet to stand in defense of our children's future, in defense of good governance. I repeat, I do not support any political party in this country. I support good governance because I'm a part of governance. The people are a part and the most important part of governing this nation. We must agitate, therefore, for all leaders to do that which is right. I don't expect Mr. Norton to issue a statement of complaint that Ali and Jagdeo want to control the oil wealth. What does that do for me? How can you complain to the likes of Sarah Ann Lynch and Joe Biden? If Biden was serious about Guyana, he would have let Sarah Ann Lynch go a long time ago. We can't complain to people. Again, we have to fight for the rights of Guyanese. This is not a time to complain, it's a time to act. It's a time for us to arise as a nation of people to see that if we do not stand to be respected, then anyone will come to our shores and walk over us. And so these people who came here, including Mia Motley and the Ghanaian president, the Surinamese president, all of them came because Guyana seems to be an easy picking, a Paku nation. You do what you want to do with them, show them a few candies here and there, and you get whatever you want. I am livid. I am extremely upset because we are being raped as a nation. And our leaders aren't fighting.
There you heard it. Our leaders are not fighting. I had my brother Takumo Gonse, who was on here last evening, and I asked him why the PPP is doing all this stuff. And he said bluntly, because we allow them. Because we Black people allow them. Apostle, comment on that comment.
It's a fact, because our political parties have got ethnic labels to them. I don't know why. I guess people, even the BBC did it. They say the PNC is predominantly African, which is true. The PPP is predominantly Indian, which is true according to what the demographics are. And so, if the PNC is known as this African or Black people party, then why are you allowing your leaders to do this to you? There are too many things happen to us. When the government, in this indecisive, I call it, election, when the PPP was put into office, they removed an entire complement of staff from St. John's Anglican Brigade, all of them. Every last one of them, 99% African, were put out of a job instantly. And it seemed as if Joseph Harmon then and Granger were asleep. Because again, I say, these people have done this to Londoners. When the vaccine policy, as Frank Anthony called vaccine, came into being, they locked the nurses and doctors out of the hospital in Linden. No other hospital in reference to significance and size had that happen to them. The very first hospital in this whole country that had the doctors and nurses locked out of a gate, while people, I stood there and saw people unconscious being taken to the hospital, nobody was there to take care of them. Frank Anthony saw nothing wrong with that. Jagdeo saw nothing wrong with it. Ali saw nothing wrong with it. But I stood there and said, it will not happen. And I sought to engage Frank Anthony. Now, there's the people brought the bridge to say, well, here, if you don't open the gate, we will not open the bridge. And that led to the gate being open again. They were demonstrating to us that they have no intention to show respect for the African Guyanese. When Jeffries labeled Jagdeo as racist, Jagdeo again showed his weakness because he suddenly saw that Ghana was a country that he loves. And he had to head to Ghana to have a conversation because our history as Africans is so deeply embedded in Ghana that he knows history now. So he found the source, he thought, of where we were dragged from to get here. What he didn't find, though, was the true history, that we did not begin at the door of no return. Our history is way beyond the gate of the point of no return. We were rulers, many of us, our forefathers, priests, kings, businessmen. So instead of engaging us who are here as descendants, he headed all the way to Africa to engage, to show he likes black people. But he didn't reinstate the complement of staff at St. John's Ambulance Brigade. No, he instead supported Gaisuko, which is predominantly Indian. He didn't subsidize St. John's Ambulance Brigade. No, he subsidized Gaisuko. And this is the first time that I saw he sat with African leaders who came from the US. He came with some African businessmen here, and he's saying, okay, that I'm not racist. The fact that Jagdeo has to make such a great effort to show he's not racist, he is. Because I don't make an effort to show I'm not racist. I don't have to make an effort to show I'm not racist to go to this extent. So the Guyanese people who support the PNC, I should say, who are of African descent, you are allowing your leaders to disrespect you and to play with your future. Even this last fiasco about who should be the leader of the list and who should be, whether Norton should be automatically considered the leader of the opposition, and what should he do and where should he go. Even that, the fact that it became such a circus is enough to cause, or should have been enough to cause, the Africans who support the PNC to say, listen, we're going through too much. We are dealing with too much. Too many of us, even in reference to the banking industry, we don't have equal access to loans. We don't have business opportunities like many other people. This is because political figures in the House of Assembly are being paid to function and also to be dysfunctional. And their supporters are not holding their feet to the fire to say that if you do not function, we shall go to Congress Place and we shall raise hell, as it's called. If only we can find people with the courage again to stand with an understanding, and that's why I'm so willing to speak to so many people if I can, because we have to re-educate our people. They have to learn. We have a generation who doesn't function well with information, and we have to do our best to get them in an information age, ironically so, to understand how information functions. Once you are equipped with information, then you're supposed to act based on the equipment you've had. So when we empower you with information, the next expected action is you'll do something about the knowledge you have. So when you know what your leaders are supposed to do, then you must do something with that knowledge. You have to act on that knowledge that you have, because that's the only way we're going to free ourselves. But I call today on every guy needs to understand the value and the importance of good governance, not party support, not political support, good governance. African Guyanese, if you support PNC or not, whatever you support, always demand good governance from your leaders or get rid of them.
Apostle Nigel London speaking truth to power tonight on Politics 101. I want to thank you in the audience for your very enlightening and enlightened comments, and we often take them on board. It is good that you are engaged. The apostle said just now, in an age of information, sometimes our people are not as informed as they should be. And, it's the price we pay for easy information is that people then take information for granted. And look, among other things, look, we want to win elections. And we want to remove this government from off our backs, but we also want to affirm our humanity. You all have heard me talk about that here so often.
Oh, yes.
We can win an election, we can get government, but if we lose our humanity in the process, that government and those elections will be nothing. My brother, there's still some religious people who think they should not get involved in politics. Speak to them.
I'll try my best to do so, because it is what the notion of politics is. I grew up hearing that politics is a dirty game. And the fact that I've heard that for 47, well, I didn't have sense, as you say then. From all the years I've had sense, as you put it. 40 plus years, I'm hearing politics is a dirty game. It tells me that the view of politics has been so tarnished that even the most righteous of men is afraid to deal with it. When it should actually be the most upright should be the ones who govern. Because the scripture records that when the righteous rule, the people rejoice. So people are crying every day about the bad nature, the terrible way in which they're being handled by leaders, because leaders are evil in their view. Well, if the leaders are not behaving themselves in a righteous manner, why not have those who are upright and integral lead? But what I think happens is that the culture of politics in Guyana is not attractive to certain people because it is filled with mudslinging, juvenile behavior, like the dildo comment from that idiot. Right. So we don't have class. That's the best way I can put it in politics in many parts of our society. And so it's not attractive because persons don't like. And the other thing is, many preachers, I can speak for the preacher's perspective, they don't like people speaking rough to them because in the church circle it's safe. You see, when a man mounts a pulpit, he's called a man of God. And when he begins to speak, they say, touch not the Lord's anointed. You can't question the prophet. So he's so surrounded by armor bearers, as they call it, as if he has he's broke and needs people to protect him. I don't know why. So you have got this culture whereby they feel that this, listen, I am so loved by the people. It's my brother. They give me gifts and they bow to me. So in that paradigm, they cannot handle Parliament because they can't handle heckling and they cannot handle bad PR. And so they avoid it because it is too rough a game for them. However, I would like to submit to anyone that you do not have to necessarily run for office to be involved in politics. Be involved in the governance of your country. You don't have to run for office to say that which is right. We must, as a people, again, I say, move the nation forward. The people's movement is about moving across political lines, across ethnic lines, across all of these barriers we build, even religious lines, to say it's time for Guyanese to understand the value of good governance. Religious men speak righteously, stand up and hold elected officials accountable. If they are malfunctioning as Dharamlal is malfunctioning, he should not be representing anyone in the House of Assembly. That's politics. You are interested in the governance of your country. I, on the other hand, never wanted to deal with this. I never wanted to have any public office per se. I don't want. But at the end of the day, this is what happened to me. I recognize that if I am unwilling to serve my people in this country, in the highest office or anything below that, I may be failing them. Because at least I must be willing to serve them in any capacity that they ask of me. I had to come to that stage when I saw the injustices by the PPP Civic Administration and the silence of the APNU AFC, especially Granger, Harman, and others. When I saw how weak these men were, I realized that I have to stand. But most importantly, my brother, when I was told to my face by an assistant superintendent in the Ghana Police Force that I cannot stand on one side of the road and speak to people across the other side without their permission. Now with a speaker here, I cannot stand on one side and tell people on the other side that they must not accept tyranny. That made me realize that Ghana is in serious, very serious trouble. I said, if you could seek to tell me in my country that I cannot speak to my countrymen, I will have to, even if I don't want to, represent them in any office, because the likes of these people must not be in our police force. When they could seek to harass a citizen to say that even your freedom to speak will be stripped from you because of Frank Anthony, Bar Jagbio, Mark Phillips, and the others. So though they may not want to say that they, in reference to the clergy, they may not want to venture into political offices, you still have political responsibility. because the scripture says that you must defend the poor and the needy. You must fight against the oppressor, and you must defend the oppressed. You cannot defend the oppressed if you silence about their oppression. And to speak for righteousness and to speak for justice for the poor puts you in politics, because it puts you in governance of your country. So don't be afraid of it. Be courageous to speak to it, because you speak to it in your pulpits. People just don't hear you saying it. So come out from the shelters of the church, come out from the mosque, come out from the temples, and speak to injustices, because that is called governance. And that is what politics is about, where we speak to the mechanics of our society and to the engines that move the society. And we say without fear that it must be right, or you're going to hear from us.
The voice there and the wisdom of Apostle Nigel London. Brother Nigel, is there anything you want to say that I didn't ask you and you want to leave with our audience?
Sure. I must say that you have certainly asked me quite a bit today, and you have made me quite comfortable on your program. I must say I'm grateful for that. Thank you for the opportunity, and please continue to encourage and to agitate for there to be the strong will of the Guyanese people being revived, the will to stand, the will to fight, and the will to win. We must restore some degree of order and sense to our nation. Too much is at stake for us to play around. I must say that we are being invaded again, but this time with smiles and good gestures. We must be cognizant of the imperialists, of the neocolonialists, of those who only see us as valuable if they can control what we own, which is our oil, gold, and other resources. As a people, therefore, let us shed, get rid of, drop all of the nonsense, and stand as one people who understand that unless we unite and fight, our generations shall be deemed, as they already are, second, third, and fourth class citizens in our very own nation. I thank you, Dr. Hines.
And thank you very much, my brother, for coming on. You've certainly enriched our discussions, and that is what we aim to do every night. 3, 4, 5 of us come out and we try to keep our people engaged and mobilized. We come at it from our different standpoint. And it speaks about the diversity in our community, right? That we can comment on the same thing, but we come at it from different angles.
Correct.
You may get from Mark, you will get that question of a different angle from Sharon and a different angle from myself. At the end of the day, our people are much more enriched because they get the apostle to speak to one issue from 4 different angles. And that is one of our strengths. It's not about competing against each other.
Right.
But pooling our resources in the spirit of our ancestors and buying new villages. We bought those villages at emancipation time. And as the brother said tonight, at this critical moment, we have to be prepared to push back against colonialism and to think about buying new villages with the new fund oil well. Thank you, my brother. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
To you, the audience, I want to say thank you. Those of you on CAMS TV, you're here in your large numbers, but there is another 350 of us on Politics 101 website who have joined us tonight. I always forget to say hello to them. And then there's another 300 on YouTube who is following us. So our numbers here tonight went up close to 800, and we had another 650 or so on Politics 101 and on YouTube. We are large in numbers too. Thank you all so much. Fitzralph, my brother, from the old days when we used to be on the streets. Thank you for always tuning in to all the sisters and brothers. Somebody here was talking about the people's, the PCD, I think, yes, Brother Fitz. Yes, I want to thank you all, and I want to thank you all for the love that you all have shown to the brother tonight. He may not be a member of a political party, but we all can't be members of political parties. We have to cover all the bases. I always say, at the end of the day, jump high, jump low. Sometimes I get vexed with you all, but the love that I have for my people, the love I have for you as African people, for you as Guyanese, whether you're African or East Indians, Chinese and Amerindians, the love for us as West Indians, because we are a people of a civilization. And now, once again, we are called upon to fight in our own name, to preserve that which the good Lord has blessed us with. And who God bless, who God bless, I know you know the rest. Good night. Say hello to Sherrod and Mark. And I'm not going to be seeing you all until next Tuesday. So have a nice weekend. Love you all very much. And for those of you who have contributed in small ways and not so small ways to Politics 101, I want to thank you. I want to thank you. I may not ask very often, but it doesn't mean that Politics 101 cannot do with your little contribution, your not so little contribution. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You know yourself, you have not given me permission to say publicly, but you know who you are. Thank you so very much. 1-1 Dotty, Bildam, and thank God for small mercies. Good night. Gotta go.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.